My name is Evelyn Morgan. I'm 35 years old, and last Saturday I attended my sister Clarissa's 15th anniversary gala. The rooftop of the Callaway Grand Hotel sparkled beneath the San Francisco skyline. Chandeliers suspended from white satin drapes, swaying gently in the ocean breeze. String lights wound around pillars like vines in a fairy tale, casting a golden hue over the immaculately dressed crowd. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne flutes. Laughter echoed like polished silver, and the sound of a live quartet drifted from the corner of the terrace like a memory you weren't sure you had. It was, in every sense, a picture-perfect celebration of love and longevity. Clarissa's specialty. She stood in the center of it all, radiant in a tailored pearl gown that must have cost more than my entire car. Her makeup was flawless, her smile wide, her left hand resting possessively on the shoulder of her husband, Dean Kensington, the golden couple in every camera angle. And yet, as I stepped off the elevator and made my way across the marble floor toward the crowd, I couldn't shake the tightening sensation in my chest. Something was off. Not just the usual nerves that come with being the single sister attending a family function alone, but something quieter, more instinctive. A small pulse of warning in the back of my mind. Maybe it was the way Clarissa's eyes flicked toward me the moment she noticed my arrival. Sharp, calculating, a flash of something unreadable before she reassembled her charm. Or maybe it was the fact that, despite her rehearsed excitement, she didn't offer me a hug. Only air kisses that brushed my cheek like butterflies made of steel. "Evelyn," she cooed, voice syrupy sweet. "You made it. I wasn't sure you'd come, with how busy your heroic surgeries must keep you." I smiled politely, ignoring the jab. "Wouldn't miss it. 15 years is a milestone." "Oh, it certainly is," she agreed, her eyes briefly scanning my outfit before adding, "That dress is unexpected, very bold. Red suits some people." I nearly bit my lip. Clarissa always had a way of turning compliments into covert cuts. I glanced around, expecting to see our parents. Instead, I noticed I'd been led toward a table near the terrace doors, far from the family table. "Where should I put my gift?" I asked, scanning the space. "Oh," she said lightly, "just hand it to one of the staff. No need to make a scene." A strange choice of words, but I said nothing. Dean appeared then, sliding an arm around her waist, the practiced gesture of a man used to playing his part. He smiled at me, a little more genuine, a little more weary. "Evelyn," he said warmly, "you look amazing." "Dean," I returned his smile. "Congratulations." 15 years, he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "She deserves a medal." Clarissa's laugh was brittle. "Don't be silly, darling. I deserve a yacht." He pressed a kiss to her temple, but his eyes lingered on me for a second too long. And just like that, the first crack appeared in their perfectly polished facade. Growing up with Clarissa was like living in a competition you never signed up for but still kept losing. She was 3 years older, 3 inches taller, and seemed to have a built-in radar for anything I wanted, just so she could get there first. When I won my first citywide science fair in middle school, she turned around and secured a summer mentorship with a Stanford researcher, then told everyone at Thanksgiving I had copied one of her old ideas. When I got accepted to med school, she arranged a last-minute PR internship in New York just to keep the family spotlight on her. Our parents, ever the optimists, always called it healthy sibling rivalry. But it never felt healthy. It felt like drowning in still water. Silent, slow, and suffocating. Still, I tried. Every betrayal was followed by a breathy apology, a tearful phone call, a bouquet of flowers sent to my hospital wing. And every time, I'd forgive her. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to believe we could be more than this twisted loop of envy and performance. When Clarissa met Dean Kensington at a Silicon Valley benefit, I was genuinely happy for her. He was polished, successful, kind in that quiet, grounded way that didn't flinch under pressure. Unlike Clarissa, he seemed sincere. I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, she had finally found someone who brought out her best instead of her worst. They got married at a vineyard in Sonoma 3 years later. I stood beside her as maid of honor. The air smelled like lavender and champagne. I told myself she had changed, that we had both grown. For a while, things were civil. surface deep but manageable. Family holidays didn't implode. We could attend the same dinner parties without passive-aggressive jabs. Clarissa even called me for advice when Dean had his ACL surgery, asking which surgeon I'd recommend. And then came the invitation. Embossed ivory cardstock with gold foil lettering. Clarissa and Dean, celebrating 15 years of love, growth, and forever. I remember holding the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Something about the timing felt off. I had just ended a long-term relationship with Noah, a fellow trauma surgeon who couldn't understand why I prioritized patients over date nights. The breakup had been messy, not loud but quietly devastating. I hadn't even told my parents yet. And here came Clarissa, smiling from an engagement-style photo on expensive paper, reminding everyone she'd held it together for 15 years while I was, once again, arriving alone. But I went. I told myself it would be good to show face, to support family, to celebrate love even if I didn't feel it in my own life. And maybe, I hoped, just a little, I could reconnect with Clarissa as sisters, not opponents. Now, standing at the edge of the rooftop, drink in hand, watching her pose for photos beside a towering floral arch, I wondered how I could have been so naive. "Evelyn," a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Dean. He was holding 2 drinks, offering me one. "You look like you could use a refill." I took the glass, our fingers brushing slightly. I haven't even finished the first. "Well," he said with a crooked grin, "then consider this a backup plan." His tone was light, but something in his eyes felt heavy. "How have you really been?" he asked after a beat. I hesitated. "Working a lot? Emergency shifts haven't slowed down." "And outside of work?" "That's complicated," I admitted. Dean nodded, then looked out over the skyline, his jaw tight. "You know," he said after a moment, "when Clarissa planned this party, she told me it was a chance to remember why we fell in love." I glanced at him. "And has it worked?" His silence said more than words ever could. "She's been different lately," he added, choosing carefully. "Controlling, more than usual." "More than usual?" I repeated softly, arching a brow. "You of all people understand what that means," he said, eyes still on the horizon. "You grew up with her." Before I could respond, Clarissa's voice cut through the music, her heels clicking toward us like warning bells. "There you are," she said brightly, her smile too perfect. "Dean, the Monroes want to see the slideshow. Evelyn, why don't you freshen up? The restroom's just past the dessert table." There was no question in her tone, just direction masked as suggestion. Dean handed me the backup glass. "See you in a bit." I nodded and walked toward the restroom. But as I reached the mirrored hallway, I saw it. Their reflection in the long glass window. Clarissa was staring after me, her smile gone, her eyes narrowed. And when she thought no one was looking, she slipped her hand into her clutch, pulled something out, and moved toward my drink on the table. I stopped. My heart kicked against my ribs. Because that look on her face? It was the same one she wore the night she made my college roommate mysteriously ill before finals. Something was happening. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. I lingered just outside the ballroom, my heels planted on the edge of the marble tile, one hand gripping the doorframe like it might steady the storm building inside me. I wasn't imagining things. I knew that look, that movement, that familiar sleight of hand masked as elegance. Clarissa had done something to my drink. The thought wasn't speculative, it was visceral. It lived in my gut, curled like a fist. I took a slow, measured breath and turned around, retracing my steps toward the table. The night had shifted, though no one else could feel it. Guests laughed and posed for selfies under the hanging floral garlands. A few even tried to pull me into conversation as I passed, but my eyes stayed fixed on my champagne glass, waiting for confirmation that I hadn't lost my mind. It was there, right where I'd left it. The rim of the flute sparkled under the ambient lights, a strawberry perched on the edge like a final flourish, and beside it a small ivory card. "To my favorite sister, Dee. Love, C." My stomach tightened. Clarissa never called me her favorite anything, not unless there was an audience or an angle. As I reached for the glass, something moved in the reflection of the grand window beside me, just a whisper of movement, but enough to make me pause. Clarissa. She was watching me, just a few feet behind, standing near a column of orchids, half hidden in shadow. She hadn't seen the mirrored panel behind the display. She didn't know I could see her watching me, and that was her mistake, because what I saw next chilled me. In the reflection, she glanced left, then right. Quick, deliberate. No one was watching. Her finger slipped into her purse again, pulled out something small, too fast for anyone but someone trained to observe. And then, without hesitation, she dropped it into the champagne glass. A flick of the wrist, a barely perceptible swirl. And it was done. She smiled. It wasn't the smile she used in magazine spreads or gala openings. It was private, satisfied, like a plan had finally reached its moment of execution. Then she turned and vanished into the crowd. I stared at the glass. I was a trauma surgeon. I'd seen overdoses, poisonings, pills dropped into drinks by cowards in crowded clubs. But this? From my own sister? I tilted the glass slightly toward the candlelight. There it was, just barely. A residue clinging to the inside curve. Dissolved now, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. I didn't know what it was. A sedative? A muscle relaxant? Something to make me disoriented? Slur my words? Embarrass myself in front of 100 people? It didn't matter, because I wasn't going to drink it. But someone else would. And the choice was obvious. Dean. If Clarissa's venom had been triggered by the sight of us talking, by the way he confided in me, trusted me, then maybe it was time he understood just how far she was willing to go to preserve her image, to protect her fragile illusion of perfection. I didn't make the decision out of vengeance. I made it out of necessity. She had to be exposed, and he had to see it for himself. I spotted Dean near the gallery entrance, speaking to one of his tech investor friends. Clarissa was nowhere in sight. It was the perfect moment. I picked up the flute with steady hands and made my way over. "Dean," I called softly, catching his eye. He turned, surprised. "Everything okay?" "I think we forgot something," I said lightly. "We never toasted." He chuckled. "There have been a lot of toasts tonight." "Not like this one," I replied, holding out the champagne. He glanced at the glass, then at me. "You sure?" I smiled. To 15 years, and whatever truths still need to surface. That gave him pause. He looked into my eyes, then slowly accepted the glass. "To truth," he said, raising it. "To clarity," I returned, raising the whiskey glass I'd taken from his nearby table. He sipped the champagne in one clean motion. And I watched as my sister's poison, whatever it was, entered the bloodstream of the man she claimed to love, the man she had just tried to silence. At first, nothing happened. Dean stood beside me, relaxed, his posture casual as he finished the last sip of champagne. He didn't blink, didn't sway, didn't cough. For a split second, I thought maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe Clarissa hadn't dropped anything in my drink after all. Maybe I had let years of suspicion and buried hurt convince me of a crime that hadn't happened. But then I saw it. The tiniest twitch in Dean's jaw. He blinked slowly, then again. His eyes didn't quite focus the way they had before. He lifted his hand as if to adjust his collar, but missed slightly, fingers grazing his shoulder instead. He laughed at something someone said near us, only no one had said anything. And then he murmured, "Warm up here, huh?" while tugging at his tie. My pulse quickened. Clarissa was nowhere in sight, but that didn't stop the ice from slipping into my bloodstream. I had no idea what she'd used. Something mild? Something pharmaceutical? Or something worse? Something she'd gotten from someone who didn't ask questions? Dean ran a hand through his hair, then stumbled slightly. Not a fall, but the kind of unbalanced shift that doctors notice and civilians ignore. I watched him closely as he made his way back toward the main floor. The ballroom was glowing with golden light. Couples slow dancing under the star-shaped chandeliers. No one suspected a thing, but I did. And Clarissa? Clarissa saw me. She appeared from the far end of the room like a storm wearing lipstick, her heels sharp against the floor. her expression unreadable but her eyes burning with something dangerous. She made a beeline toward me, weaving through guests like she owned the air between us. "Having fun?" she asked, the edges of her voice too smooth. "Lovely evening," I replied. She tilted her head. "I saw you and Dean toasting." I kept my voice even. "You noticed?" "I always notice," she said, stepping closer. "He seemed, looser, happier." I said nothing. She narrowed her eyes, the corners of her mouth twitching, betraying the effort it took to stay composed. "And how's your drink?" "Oh, I didn't drink it," I said lightly. "Didn't feel like champagne." Her face paled, just slightly. "But I saw you take a sip." I smiled. "Did you?" Her lips parted. For a moment, she stood frozen, calculating, unraveling, recalculating. "You switched them," she breathed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her voice dropped into a hiss. "You had no right. And you had no right to drop anything in my drink in the first place." "I didn't do anything harmful," she snapped. "Just a little something to relax you. Take the edge off. God, you're always so tight." "You drugged me," I said, still calm. "At your own anniversary party." Clarissa's eyes darted across the room. "Keep your voice down." I didn't. "No, let's keep it right here. Let's keep everything in the light tonight." Her hand tightened around her clutch. "You don't understand what you've done." "No, Clarissa, you don't understand what you've revealed." Behind her, Dean was swaying slightly as he accepted a glass of water from one of the servers. The lights seemed to shimmer oddly around him as he grinned too widely at a guest, then slurred something unintelligible. Clarissa hadn't noticed yet. She was too busy trying to keep her mask in place. I leaned in, just enough for her to hear me over the music. "He drank your truth, Clarissa, and you're about to watch it unravel in front of everyone you fooled for 15 years. She turned slowly, just in time to see Dean trip over his own feet and knock into the edge of the dessert table, sending an entire tower of macarons cascading to the floor. Guests gasped, heads turned, and someone stifled a laugh. Clarissa's hands flew to her mouth. "Dean!" But it was too late. The glass had shattered, and so had the illusion. The room had shifted. You could feel it in the silence, not absolute, but taut and buzzing. Someone's nervous laughter rippled and died almost immediately as all eyes fixed on Dean, who now stood swaying near the dessert table, blinking at the pile of shattered glass and pastel-colored pastries like he didn't quite understand how they got there. Clarissa rushed forward with her signature grace, elegant, poised, camera-ready. But as she reached her husband, that practiced veneer cracked. "Dean?" she said under her breath, seizing his arm. "What are you doing?" "Sit down." He stared at her like she was speaking another language. Then his mouth twitched into a dopey half-smile. "Clarissa," he drawled, drawing out the S like it was velvet. "You remember that time we got lost on the Pacific Coast Highway and you cried because your heels got sand on them?" Her grip tightened on his sleeve. "Let's sit down, darling." I'm fine," he snapped suddenly, too loud. A few guests flinched, then softer. "I'm just warm. And the lights keep moving." He looked around, confused. "Is it hot in here, or is it just my miserable marriage?" Gasps echoed. Clarissa let out a sharp laugh, the kind people use to control the narrative. "He's joking, everyone. A little too much to drink. Our caterers have been generous." But Dean's face had gone slack with a strange detachment. No, I haven't had much. Just the champagne with Evelyn. And now everything's spinning." And then, as if in slow motion, he began to lean sideways. The crowd moved too late. Dean fell into a passing waiter, sending a tray of flutes crashing to the floor in a sparkling explosion. The sound shattered the tension. Gasps turned into rising voices. Clarissa crouched beside him, panic in her voice now. "Dean, look at me, Dean, say something." He was murmuring, trying to sit up, failing. Our father, once a surgeon himself, pushed through the crowd and knelt. "Pulse is fast, pupils reactive but unfocused. We need EMTs." I'll call, my mother said, already on her phone. Clarissa's face turned toward me, and in her eyes, sharp, glassy, cornered, I saw recognition. She wasn't scared for Dean. She was scared of what he might say. A murmur stirred the crowd. Did he have a seizure? Was it a stroke? Is he drunk? But he wasn't drunk. Not really. Because I knew what was in his system. Clarissa's voice cracked through the noise. It's just low blood sugar. He skipped lunch. Stop, I said loud enough that it cut across the tension. She froze. All eyes shifted to me. I walked forward slowly, the ballroom suddenly vast beneath my heels, and crouched beside Dean, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow. Dean, I said softly, can you tell me what you had to drink tonight? He blinked up at me, struggling to form the words. I had whiskey and champagne with you. Then things got weird. Clarissa surged forward. You're not helping. I think I am, I interrupted, not breaking eye contact with Dean. I just need to know if anything else might be in his system. His brow furrowed. No? Just the champagne. The one you handed me. Clarissa's hand grabbed my wrist suddenly. Stop talking. But she was too late. Our mother knelt beside me, her voice tight with alarm. Did someone drug him? I looked up at her, then across at Clarissa, who was pale now, paler than I'd ever seen her. My voice didn't waver. Yes. The room stopped breathing. I stood slowly, my hands steady, my spine straight. I saw her put something in my glass, I said, gesturing toward Clarissa. She thought I'd drink it, but I didn't. I gave it to Dean. Clarissa's lips parted, horror blooming behind her eyes. That's not what happened. Our father stood now too, his expression stony. What did you put in the drink, Clarissa? Her voice dropped to a whisper. It was just Ativan, a tiny bit, just to calm her down. Ativan, a benzodiazepine. Mixed with alcohol, it could cause severe drowsiness, disorientation, respiratory depression, or worse. I felt a cold fury swell in my chest. You drugged me, I said. No. It wasn't like that. I just wanted to take the edge off. You were tense and you drugged your sister, our mother repeated, each word like a hammer. Clarissa looked around the room, realizing too late that the spell was broken, that no charm or smile or perfect lighting could undo this. Dean, barely conscious, mumbled, You tried to drug her? The paramedics arrived then, pushing through the crowd. Clarissa stood there, motionless, as they knelt around Dean. And the look she gave me, sharp, guttural, unblinking, wasn't hatred. It was terror. Because for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. And she knew it. The ballroom emptied in waves. Some guests left with a muttered excuse, others lingered, wide-eyed and whispering in stunned disbelief. The string quartet had long stopped playing. Waiters stood awkwardly near the walls, unsure if they should clear the tables or just disappear. I watched as the paramedics wheeled Dean toward the elevator, his head lolled slightly to the side, his hand loosely gripping the side rail. My father walked beside the stretcher, murmuring to one of the EMTs in a voice low but urgent. My mother held her phone tight to her chest, her face unreadable in the low amber light. Clarissa stood near the bar, frozen. Her white pearl gown, so pristine an hour ago, now looked too bright, almost sterile, against the chaos she had unleashed. Her hands trembled. Her mascara was smudged at the corners. For the first time in her perfectly curated adult life, Clarissa Morgan didn't look flawless. She looked unmasked. The hotel manager approached quietly, his voice gentle but firm. We've contacted authorities, ma'am. Standard procedure when a guest is possibly drugged. Clarissa nodded numbly, but her eyes flicked to me with a look that could have cut glass. This is your fault, she said, her voice hoarse. I took one step toward her. No, this is yours. You didn't have to give it to him? I didn't know what it was. My voice cracked under the weight of restraint I'd been carrying all night. I just knew you tried to drug me, Clarissa. Me, your sister. She flinched like I'd slapped her. And maybe I had, in the only way that ever landed, with the truth. You don't get to shift the blame this time, I said more softly. Not to me, not to him, not to anyone. She opened her mouth to reply, but then paused. The weight of what she'd done finally began to settle across her shoulders. A uniformed officer arrived minutes later, speaking first with the hotel manager, then with the EMTs. Then he turned to us. I need statements from anyone involved, he said calmly. Clarissa's hands clenched. Can this wait? I need to go with my husband. He's stable now, I said, but what you did isn't going to disappear just because you walk away. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she whispered. But you did, I replied. And it wasn't an accident, it was calculated, like it always is. The officer looked between us. Ma'am, he said to her, did you place a substance into your sister's drink? Her eyes filled. Yes, but only a tiny bit. I didn't think. That's not how this works, he said. We'll need to document this. I'm not pressing charges, Dean said from the gurney, suddenly alert. His voice was thin, but clear. But I want it on record. All heads turned. The elevator doors had just begun to close when he lifted his head. I want it known what she did, because this was the last line, and she crossed it. Clarissa turned pale again, her mouth opening and closing like something in her throat had broken. And just like that, the elevator closed between them. We were taken to a private lounge off the ballroom to give our statements. I recounted everything, step by step, with a calm that felt strangely disconnected from my body. Clarissa sat beside her lawyer, who had arrived halfway through. Her answers were clipped, rehearsed, like she was trying to wrap control back around herself before the world noticed she'd dropped it. But it was too late. After I signed the last page of my statement, I stepped outside the lounge and sat on a low velvet bench in the hallway. My heels pinched. My hands smelled faintly of roses and smoke. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything at all. Just an odd stillness. As if my body was trying to make sense of what it meant when the person who shared your childhood tried to chemically erase your dignity in front of everyone you've ever known. Clarissa walked out minutes later, her lawyer trailing behind. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not rage, not even regret. Shame. I didn't want it to end like this, she said quietly. I don't think you ever cared how it ended, I replied. As long as you were the one in charge of the narrative. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. I might be getting help, she added. That's what they tell me I should do. I stood slowly. You should. Not because they told you, because you need it. We stared at each other for one more beat. You don't hate me? She asked, the question so small it felt like a memory of a little girl, not a grown woman. No, I said, but I can't trust you, and I don't think I should. She nodded once, and then she turned, walking down the long hallway alone, leaving behind the broken remains of her perfect night. The following days unfolded like aftershocks, quiet, unexpected, and unsettling. Dean was released from the hospital 36 hours later, stable, alert, more lucid than I'd ever seen him. The sedative hadn't left permanent physical damage, but the damage done to his trust, to his marriage, was irreversible. I visited him that afternoon. He had moved into a downtown apartment overlooking the bay, sparse and clinical, like someone trying to remember what freedom felt like. There were unopened boxes stacked neatly by the wall. No photos, no art, just clean space and air that didn't choke. He opened the door wearing a soft t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked younger, tired, but not broken. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I stepped in, hands tucked in the pockets of my coat. You asked. He nodded. I guess I needed to know you were real. That night feels like a movie I watched while half awake. You remember everything? He smiled faintly. Every word, every blurry, slurring, humiliating second of it. He motioned toward the kitchen. I followed him to the bar stools, where he poured us both water, the gesture surprisingly grounding. Why didn't you press charges? I asked gently. Dean took a slow sip. Because I wanted control back, not revenge. Pressing charges would have made everything public, and Clarissa, she thrives on narrative. Even if she loses, she rewrites the story. I understood more than he knew. So what now? I asked. He leaned forward, elbows on the counter. I filed for legal separation. My lawyer delivered the papers yesterday. I nodded. She hasn't responded yet, he added, but I don't expect a peaceful process. There was a pause. Then he looked up at me, something steady in his eyes. But I'm done being afraid of what people will think. Done pretending I'm fine when I'm not. I felt something shift inside me, something long overdue. Good, I said. You deserve your own story. Dean smiled, quiet but real. You saved me, Evelyn. Not just from that drink. From her. From staying. No, I replied, voice soft. You saved yourself. I just held the mirror. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the city breathing outside his window. The fog had begun to roll in, casting the buildings in soft gray light. Before I left, he walked me to the door. If you ever want to talk, off the record, away from champagne and paramedics, he said, I'd like that. I'd like that too. We didn't hug, but something unspoken passed between us. Not romance, not obligation, just recognition. Back home, I found my parents in the kitchen, drinking tea like it was a ritual for protection. The silence that met me wasn't cold, just heavy. She's not answering our calls, Mom finally said, placing her mug down. She's never had to answer for anything, Dad muttered. She is, now. They looked at me. You were right, Mom admitted, her voice thin but steady. About Clarissa. About how we made excuses when we should have intervened. Dad exhaled. We thought we were keeping the peace, but we were just letting the war play out behind closed doors. I nodded, unsure how to carry the quiet grief in their faces. There's talk of family therapy, Mom added. Clarissa's counselor called. She asked if we'd be willing. I didn't answer right away. My fingers traced the edge of my glass. I'll think about it, I said at last. But I'm not ready to sit in a room with her pretending this was just another sibling spat. Neither are we, Dad said. She almost destroyed her marriage. She nearly ruined you. That's not something a few apologies can erase. It wasn't anger in his voice. It was something more rare. Clarity. We sat there for a while, not as a perfect family, but as people trying, maybe for the first time, to face truth without flinching. 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. The envelope was off-white and unlined, the way Clarissa always hated. Inside was a single page. Evelyn, I know it's too soon to ask for anything, especially forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you that I've started therapy, real therapy. They say I have work to do, and I believe them. I don't know if I'll ever earn your trust again. I may not deserve it, but I'm trying, but... See. No justifications, no explanations, just the truth. It wasn't enough, not yet. But maybe it was a beginning. 3 months passed before I saw Clarissa again. She requested to meet at a small cafe in Pacific Heights, neutral ground halfway between her therapist's office and my hospital. I hesitated before agreeing, not out of fear, but because I wasn't sure what I would find. The same sister who once tried to shatter me in secret, or someone different. Someone searching. She arrived first. Gone were the heels and silk blouses, the sharp contours and rehearsed posture. She wore jeans, a beige sweater, no visible makeup. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun that looked like she'd actually done it herself. There was no trace of the woman who once color-coordinated her lipstick to the linen napkins at her own anniversary party. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat across from her. I wasn't sure I would, I replied honestly. I wasn't sure I deserved it, she said, voice low. A waitress brought tea. We sat in silence for a while, awkward but not unbearable. How's Dean? She asked finally. He's okay, I said. Still in therapy, still sorting through everything. She nodded. I don't expect him to forgive me. He's not ready to, and that's not yours to control anymore. Clarissa looked down at her cup. That's what I'm learning, slowly. The line between apology and accountability, between control and care. She paused, then added, my therapist calls it emotional recalibration. I call it realizing I was a walking wound I kept bleeding onto other people. I studied her for a long moment. Her words weren't performative. They weren't perfectly packaged for effect. They were real. I've spent so long being angry with you, I said. Not just for what you did that night, but for everything before. The lies, the undermining, the way you made me feel small just to feel bigger. Clarissa didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. And part of me wanted to punish you. Wanted you to feel humiliated the way you humiliated me. You did, she whispered. But it didn't feel good, I admitted. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like proof that we were both broken. Clarissa's eyes glistened. I'm not here to fix us, I continued. I don't think I even believe in that version of us anymore. But I am here because I think we might have a chance at something new, if we earn it. Her voice shook slightly. What does that look like? Boundaries, I said. Radical honesty. No performance, no manipulation, just two women trying to figure out who they are beyond a shared childhood and a broken template. Clarissa breathed out a sound between a laugh and a sigh. That's terrifying. It is, I said, but it's also honest. And that's something we've never really tried. She nodded slowly, her hands wrapped around her cup like it was the only warm thing she had left. I've accepted a job offer, she said suddenly. In Oregon, a nonprofit that works with women rebuilding their lives post-incarceration. It's a junior role, way below my resume. Why? Because for once, I want to build something I didn't manipulate my way into. I blinked. Not out of disbelief, but out of a strange, quiet respect. When do you leave? Next month. I nodded. Distance might help. For both of us. I hope so, she said. Then, hesitantly, would it be okay if I hugged you? I didn't answer right away. I studied her eyes, still vulnerable, but no longer searching for leverage. I stood slowly and let her wrap her arms around me. It was brief. No tears. Just wait. As we pulled apart, she said, thank you for not letting me destroy you and for holding up the mirror. I didn't do it for you, I said softly. I did it for me, for Dean, for the truth. Still, she said, it saved me too. Weeks later, I stood at my kitchen window watching the morning fog drift in. A letter lay on the table behind me. This time typed, brief, mailed from her new apartment in Portland. One step at a time, Clarissa. And that was enough. Not everything can be repaired. Some relationships aren't meant to be what they once were. But sometimes in the ashes of betrayal, something different can grow. Not perfect, not familiar, but honest. Sometimes love doesn't mean forgiving and forgetting. Sometimes it means remembering and choosing anyway. For me, it started with a single glass, a moment of instinct, a decision to say no more. And from that moment on, I stopped drinking what they poured for me and started serving myself something better.